I must confess, here I am less sure about the appropriateness of my own lens of analysis. Did Bush decide and lead well? Or did he do poorly? There was a stimulus package, and the White House accepted a compromise proposal on the bank bailout, although what that is seems to be ever-changing. But was it enough? Was it even the right course? I have no clear answers. Nor, unfortunately, do I have a clear perspective on what awaits in the future. But one thing is sure. Time and response remained important. It had simply run out for this president, as it does now for me. Thank you. We have some time if anybody would like to pose some questions. In addition to this, questions about the current transition, et cetera. Yes, sir.
Can you comment on George Tenet's position that CIA served as a fall guy for the justification of the invasion of Iraq?
It would take a long time to answer that question. Tenet talks about that in his recent memoirs. And of course, you have to be a little bit suspicious when people write their memoirs so soon after they leave office. I would not so much say that the CIA was targeted, as that concerns were being raised that perhaps the CIA was attempting to protect itself with the media. And the White House at times felt sort of compelled to defensively respond to that. And then, of course, it gets into the whole controversy, and there are different versions of this. And this, of course, is Tenet's famous slam dunk case comment, which Bob Woodward talks about in one of the books. Meeting with George W. Bush, not a meeting of the principals, but I think Andrew Card was there and a couple of other people. You know, and the case for war against Iraq is presented, and Tenet either was asked or spontaneously said, "This is a slam dunk case, Mr. President." And Bush responds, "I don't know about that." I don't remember what his exact words were, but Bush was quite cautious that this didn't seem to sell him enough. And this is taken sort of in two ways. One as Tenet reassuring the president, that the information that the president had received about the case for war was slam dunk. It was clean, good. The other, of course, and this is Tenet's later version, was that they were simply discussing the public presentation of the case for war rather than the underlying merits of it. Other questions? Yes, sir.
John, I don't think we've ever had as many insider accounts of the presidency during that presidency as we've had these last 8 years. Some by former administration officials like Tenet, Karen Hughes, David Trump, and then 4 books by Bob Woodward. As far as I know, the factual content of those books has not been seriously contested by the people who write them. How does it affect the conduct of the presidency when the president knows that a lot of the things that happen within his administration are going to be publicly revealed while he's still in office? What does that do to the openness of discussions within the administration and other things?
Yeah, that's a good question, Michael. From a selfish perspective, and I'm sure you share this, we like to read these things. They provide, especially Woodward provides, interesting, interviews and commentary and so on that is quite interesting for us to use as we explore a contemporary presidency. But I think, you answered your own question, which is where people, in the past were reluctant to publish their memoirs until, many years later. Now as soon as you're out of office, you go get that lucrative contract and it's in print. And you're right. I think it can't but have, some negative impact, just like the issues raised with executive privilege, negative impact on the kind of candid advice that the president needs to get from those, kind of in his inner circle. I mean, one of the projects I did many years ago was to co-write the memoirs of Attorney General Herbert Brownell, who had been Eisenhower's first Attorney General. And Brownell waited until he was in his 90s, late 80s, to write his memoirs, because he felt as Attorney General from 1953 to 1957 that if he were to write them later on in the Eisenhower presidency, or maybe into the Kennedy or Johnson presidency, that just wasn't the right thing to do. And I think we find that for many people who were of that generation in our politics or earlier, but somehow we've lost that. Yes.
I'd like to know if you have any comment on the role of J.D. Burke. I understand she might be used in the future administration, and I hear a lot about her being a divisive person when it comes to the CIA and the relationship with other agencies.
The question was about Jamie Gorelick and the possibility of her joining the new administration. I don't know a lot about her deeply. I remember her from the 9/11 Commission, and of course, when she was in the Justice Department under President Clinton, was one of the sources of that infamous wall that was created. But I'm just afraid I can't really tell you much more than that. I think the person to watch, if you like to play inside baseball in these appointments, is Eric Holder. Eric Holder was, among other things, an African-American Deputy Attorney General under Bill Clinton. And Holder was interesting because he actually served as acting Attorney General for a while at the start of the Bush presidency, not Bush, at the start of the Bush presidency, because the Ashcroft confirmation was slightly delayed. I would hazard to guess that he will have some type of high-level office in the Clinton president or in the Obama presidency if he wants it. Most likely, Attorney General would be my guess.
Comments on the approach being taken by Obama in the transition?
That's a good question. I was hoping someone would ask. He is following the playbook of George W. Bush rather than Bill Clinton. We have all these stories about all these Clinton people who are joining or potentially joining his transition or future administration, but the game plan is a Bush one. My sense is that they were very well prepared ahead of Election Day to do this transition. Now, we don't have anybody who's given us a complete story, but we do know, that John Podesta has been working on it for a considerable period of time. Podesta, of course, former Clinton Chief of Staff, the last Clinton Chief of Staff, and did the outgoing transition from Clinton to Bush.